Hello, I'm going to talk about philosophy and try to integrate it with agricultural labor force and productivity. Before starting my speech, no need to stress that I'm not an expert on philosophy or psychology, but I just want to stress a point that I have come across in a vintage book which covers important essays including William James' essay on the energies of man. Let me firstly mention about William James. He lived in between 1842 and 1910. He began teaching anatomy and psychology at Harvard College, only to shift psychology in 1875 and finally to philosophy as he approached 40. When I read the essay of the energies of man, which was originally the presidential address delivered by James before the American Philosophical Association in 1906 and later published in a more popular form, I tried to make a connection with the ineffective labor force, particularly in rural labor in developing countries. Let me sum up what James tells us in his essay. James stressed that there are winds in human energy: first wind, second wind, third wind, fourth wind, etc. James stated that he has mused on the phenomenon on of second wind, trying to find a psychological theory. He thinks that most of the people continue living unnecessarily near their surface. He called efficiency equilibrium, neither gaining nor losing power when once the equilibrium is reached. On astonishingly different quantities of work, no matter in what directions the work may be measured. It may be physical work, intellectual work, moral work, or spiritual work. He stressed that there is a plain fact which remains that man the world over possesses amounts of resource which only very exceptional individuals pushing his energies to their extreme may in a vast number of cases keep the pace up day after day and find no reaction of a bad sort so long as decent hygienic conditions are preserved. His more active rate of energizing does not wreck him, for the organism adapts itself, and as the rate of waste augments correspondingly the rate of repair. He believes that few men live at their maximum of energy and that anyone may be in vital equilibrium at very different rates of energizing. You will find he thinks that a very practical problem of national economy as well as of individual ethics opens upon his view. In rough terms, it can be said that a man who energizes below his normal maximum fails by just so much to profit by his chance at life, and that a nation filled with such man is inferior to a nation run at higher pressure. The problem is then how can man be trained up to their most useful pitch of energy, and how can nations make such trainings most accessible to all their sons and daughters. This, after all, is only the general problem of education formulated in slightly indifferent terms. Human energizing is defined by James as some total of activities, some outer and some inner, some muscular, some emotional, some moral, and some spiritual, of whose waxing and waning in himself he is at all times so well aware. How to keep it at an appreciable maximum, how not to let the level lapse. That is a great problem. What William James could be related with human relations, general economy, working conditions in different sectors. But I would like to stress its importance in rural labor force and productivity, because in many countries, rural are lagging behind urban, or agriculture is lagging behind industry due to some factors. One of the most important factors in increasing agricultural growth is the efficiency of rural labor force. Agricultural labor productivity is defined as output per unit of labor input used in agricultural production process. For example, at the end of 1960s, India's agricultural productivity per person engaged in agriculture is a little more than 1/30-40 of that of New Zealand and West Germany, and less than 1/20 of United Kingdom, 1/24 of United States, and 1/22 of Japan. Another table shows the land and labor productivities, which were estimated as agricultural output per hectare of agricultural land area and per male worker in terms of wheat units for 1970. As you see, output per male worker in wheat units is too low in Turkey with 8.3, while it is very high rate in the US with 160.2. This implies that the role of mechanical technology is critically important in achieving high levels of labor productivity. Mechanization is economically efficient, however, only in situations characterized by a high land-labor ratio and a high wage land price ratio. We can also interface that there is more land, more capital, and more knowledge per farm in rich countries rather than poor countries. Another important factor is technical education. The non-conventional human capital variables accounted for 32% of the difference in output per worker between the United States and Argentina, India, Denmark, and Turkey. But Japan. Technical education alone accounted for 15-25% of difference between the United States and Argentina, India, Denmark, and Turkey, and 9% of the difference between United States and Japan. Thus, even if the general education variable were to be dropped because of its weak coefficient in the 1970 estimates, according to the research, human capital would remain an important factor in accounting for inter-country productivity differences. The sources of differences in labor productivity between the United States and these 5 countries are presented in table 10. The difference in agricultural output per worker between the United States and India was 98%. Between the United States and Turkey, the difference was 95%. And between the United States and Argentina, the difference was 68%. The difference was 90% in the case of Japan and 46% in the case of Denmark. Consequently, we see surplus labor and idle labor in agricultural sector, since the industry is not developed and the agricultural sector is not integrated with industry. There were some policies in 1950s and 60s in many developing countries. The agriculture is ignored at the expense of industry. So there were rapid rural migration to urban areas. Most rural people were employed in service sector. The question appears here in related with William James. Were the developing countries efficiently use these people? Probably not. The people left in the rural areas were efficiently used by including technology and mechanization? Probably not. That is why agricultural growth did not happen in the developing countries, because they cannot increase the productivity of labor force and people living in rural areas.